would note though that as a putting on my labor hat for a minute, we have Katie Garrow here, and she's great to have on here to represent everybody who uses the bridge in terms of workforce. Whether it's healthcare workers or transportation workers, maritime workers, metro, you name it. But I think a piece that we really need here is the building trades. We're talking about a project that's potentially a couple $1 billion, and we need that voice in the room. So, I just want to encourage, any way to bring that to the table. Um, Getting back to Georgetown, the point I want to make right today is some things kicking around about the funding models. There's a lot of talk about tolls and impacts. And when you talk about diversions, once again, you're talking about impacts on South Park and Georgetown, especially Georgetown. So there's talk out there of tolling the First Avenue Bridge, the South Park Bridge. Now there's talk of tolling a potential new corridor through Spokane, and now West Seattle's moved on, but these neighborhoods are going to be stuck with the existing problem, which purportedly is temporary, but want to be a permanent problem. So I want to highlight that. There's a number of issues, but I don't want to take up a lot of space. So thanks for the opportunity.
All right, thanks so much, John. Speaking of which, Katie, welcome.
Hello. As John said, I'm with MLK Labor. MLK Labor is the umbrella organization for 150 different unions in King County that perform all kinds of work, and 100,000 union members here in the region. And I want to back up John. I think Monty Anderson is the head of the Seattle Building Trades. Those are construction workers, and they have a level of depth and expertise that I do not carry. So it would be good and wise and prudent for our committee to include those construction workers in our group. A couple of the things that I've been hearing broadly from the labor community is an urgency to determine a solution and path forward quickly, so that people can get back to work and once coronavirus things change, but just the need to act urgently. Another thing that's always important to us on infrastructure projects is a desire to ensure that the project is delivered in a way that provides the most public good for our community. And that means lots of things to us, including, high labor standards. It also means using the bridge as an economic stimulus opportunity for our region to put people to work and keep people working during recessions. The private construction market tends to obviously dip, and so having public infrastructure projects during these times are really important for our workforce. And then we've been talking a lot about how we get federal government support and how we work with our federal delegation to get federal support for this project, and to make sure that we are able to complete other infrastructure projects. Our region has a lot of needs, and obviously the West Seattle Bridge is of paramount importance to us, but there are other priorities, and so wanting to be really aligned as a region when we make those asks of the state and federal government to support infrastructure here. We're all speaking with one voice, and we all have the same tiered levels of priorities. So those are some of the things we're thinking about.
Thank you, Katie. Laura?
Oh, hi, everyone. Laura, the director of the West Seattle Junction. Well, for me, it is certainly the economic impact of the bridge. Not only are small businesses in West Seattle grappling with the pandemic, but we're also now looking at how we're going to continue to conduct business with the bridge being closed. So one thing that I think would be extremely important is to talk about how we're going to support our small businesses, not only now, but also the next 2 to potentially 10 years.
Okay. Rachel Smith.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to say a few words. Rachel Smith, Deputy County Executive here representing King County Executive Dow Constantine. I'll keep my comments short. and most of this is echoing what others have said. You know, we want to make sure that we are beginning the planning for replacement while the conversation about replacement or repair continues. We want to be just make sure that we're doing that. I want to echo the sort of mobility comments. Obviously, King County Metro has a role to play there as a partner. But really, I think, you know, people can adjust in the short term, but we need swift solutions. You know, this is a resilient community, but I do think that that only lasts sort of so long. And then I also do think, you know, I think this group has clearly stated they're going to have a lot of desire to really do a deep dive into discussion around the recommendations. So trying to think through how we might do that in our sort of challenging environment. But that's something that I've heard, and we obviously would also like to be a part of that. Three things that I'll just sort of offer. One, we will use all of our channels at Metro and through the King County Executive's Office to also push out this survey and to generate interest in that. We can use the social media tools that we have to do that. Second, I will, especially because he's not here, offer up the executive to help bring any sort of civic muscle to the conversations around funding, to the conversations around mobility, to the conversations around project delivery, working with the state, working with the federal government. We are happy to help push those conversations, play a convening role, do anything that we can. And then lastly, I would just echo again what Katie Garrow said in terms of the kinds of projects that we want these to be. I think it is really thoughtful to remember that we're talking about this in the context of a recession. And so how we think about this project as a part of that recession is really important. And I also will just end by saying thank you to everybody, including Mayor Nichols, Heather Marks, the whole team who's doing really just exceptional work in such a challenging environment to help us have meaningful conversations. So thank you.
May I ask a question of Rachel? Rachel, thank you for you've been at each of our meetings representing the county executive, and I want to thank you for that. But King County is going to play an incredibly important role in this, both through the water taxi, which we hope will carry about 10% of the people who are displaced, and through Metro Transit, which is about 35%, I believe, or 30% of that. But right now, you guys are constrained in a unique fashion. You can only carry a very few number of people compared with the capacity that you have. Is there anything that we need to be aware of? Anything we can do to help you anticipate that problem and how to manage it?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think anytime there's an offer of help, the answer is yes. Figuring out exactly what that's going to look like, I think we still need to do. I mean, we are discussing, you know, obviously interactions with drivers, and so fare collections and things like that. How do we want to do that moving forward? We're thinking about, you know, the amount we're cleaning buses and things like that. Obviously, we continue to get emerging science around COVID transmission, so we're sort of constantly adjusting to that to make sure that our facilities are as safe as they can be. And I also think, you know, we meaning Metro, and I think the port and SDOT, you know, we really need to do some blue sky thinking about how to use the assets that we have, whether they are actual coaches, you know, rubber tire coaches on the ground, whether they're boats, whether they're docks, whether they're sort of the new mobility tools that we have all been experimenting with, you know, and maybe have some thoughts of like, what's the capacity we need? And then looking at all these tools in the toolbox with a COVID lens over it, how can we deploy in the way to get the most people moving? So yes to help, not sure what it looks like yet, but I think we probably want to carve off some side conversations. And Metro, obviously the technical teams work together all the time, but I think, you know, maybe you and I and some other folks to have some brainstorm there to bring to the group for discussion.
Great, thank you so much. Heather?
Boss, I'm going to hand it back over to you to facilitate. Yasmin, Representative Cody, and Senator Nguyen are the last speakers we need to hear from.
Very good. Thank you, Heather. And again, apologize for that gap. It's an interesting place to have been. Yasmin, welcome. Tell me what your concerns are and what your thoughts are, having been through several of our meetings now.
Yeah, so I'm Yasmin Mehdi. I'm with Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal's office. I'm the interim district director. The minute we heard that the West Seattle Bridge had to be closed, that me and my counterpart in DC, Jessica Mulligan, have been hard at work trying to figure out what existing resources there are. And you won't be surprised to know that there aren't great existing ones. I think people have already talked about the insufficiency of federal funding. My boss spoke on the House floor this week, actually last week, about the West Seattle Bridge, because she recognizes that this bridge is absolutely necessary in the city, but also because, you know, a lot of Seattle's bridges need some support, and the federal government needs to bring its funding sources to bear on infrastructure. So she did vote in favor of the Moving Forward bill, and we will continue to press forward. And part of my involvement here is you know, as an observer and a listener, and in order to sort of vet ideas that we should be considering at the federal level. I don't hold out huge hope, unfortunately, in the current political environment. That doesn't mean that we don't start building the bridge, if you will, to what a more positive political landscape might yield. I too want to thank everybody who is organizing this, Mayor Nichols, DOT staff. Thank you all for doing this. I'm glad to be involved. I'm also glad to use our office's resources and communications to get out the survey and help with any social media. My boss's account will be, I think, useful there. And also happy to brainstorm with other government folks about how we work together on an effort to get the most funding sources available. Thank you all again for having me.
Thank you, Yasmin, and thank your boss. I saw her remarks, and they were very helpful. And if along the way there are places where we individually or as a group can support her efforts, please let us know. Let's find a path where we can leverage whatever is available at the federal level. So thank you so much. Representative Eileen Cody, welcome. Thank you for, you've been a fairly quiet participant for all of our meetings, and I appreciate your being here and your patience, and tell us what your thoughts are on this.
Well, I'll just say on the question of the constituents that I think what I'm hearing mostly is that people just want us to make decisions and not process everything to death. You know, the famous Seattle process. That's the urgency is the biggest push that I'm hearing. I'll just say state's perspective, and I'm sure Senator Nguyen probably can say more because he's on transportation, but both Fitzgibbon and I met with the House transportation lead, Representative Phi, and have tried to, you know, push for that and get what money. And so he knows we're on the list. The problem is, of course, they are hoping to pass the transportation package next session, because God knows we need it after the transportation took a hit with the initiative last year. So, but it'll all depend on what we can do and how much money we can raise. And there's some other budget problems you might have heard about. So yeah, all those taxes we'll have to figure in.
Well,
Can I ask Eileen a question?
Yes?
Eileen, just real quick, do you know if there's any support, I guess this would be from the governor, for an emergency proclamation about the West Seattle Bridge closure?
You know, we haven't even talked about that. I thought that the mayor was doing
Well, maybe I'm thinking of a statewide position on it.
We haven't talked. I can find out. I mean, he's had
Just
a few
curious.
other emergency proclamations he's been
I
doing.
know. I know.
Deb, the process is
somewhere.
that
Thanks.
the process is that the mayor has to make an emergency declaration and then the governor. So we're in conversation with state officials on that.
Eileen, thank you again. And if there are places where we can be helpful, either individually or as a group, as that transportation package moves forward, please let us know and we'll be there. Thank you. Senator Nguyen.
Hey, how's it going? Can you guys hear me okay?
Very good. Can hear you fine. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having me. And obviously, thank you so much to everybody who's given input so far. I think the biggest thing, just to echo what Rep. Cody was saying, was that the sense of urgency is definitely needed in this situation, but also the idea that transparency as well. So I think there's a lot of good stuff happening right now within this work group and then others. And oftentimes the questions that I field can actually be answered with materials that have already been provided. So maybe making a more concerted effort, like Pramila Jaipal's staff had mentioned, / everybody else, in terms of getting the messaging out, I think could be helpful just for the optics of it as well. But the main thing, at least for me, candidly, is how do we fund this thing? Just because without that, we're kind of, there is no option without that. So obviously there is a transportation package. There are a couple that are being floated right now. All of them understand the value of this bridge and kind of impacts to our communities in them. So that's certainly going to be a big part of the discussion in this next session on the transportation committee and otherwise. And for me, it's just kind of honing in on what the state may be able to do with the federal government, with the local jurisdictions as well, because certainly I would be shocked if we could pay for this in one jurisdiction, which I don't believe is possible. So being able to start having those conversations in earnest would be fantastic as well, just because the way that our budget cycles line up, they're not perfect. So if we don't, say for instance, get it into a state transportation package now, you're looking like a few years down the road if we don't get it this next year, and doing that in conjunction with the federal government as well. So being able to have those conversations more in depth is a top priority for me, just because I know that transportation packages, at least in Washington State, don't come as often as they should.
Well, and I want to add my thanks for your participation. You've been involved in each of our meetings, and you're on the committee. And if there's any support and help that we can give along the path there, please let us know, and we will be there. It is going to be a concerted effort. Let me just share one thought from my own experience. You never have all the money in hand. The Alaskan Way Viaduct replacement, the Spokane Viaduct, shoring that up and adding the lane there, Mercer Corridor. In none of those cases did we have all of the funding in hand when we move forward. You have to have a plausible plan, but all of the pieces may not be there. In fact, if you wait for all of the pieces to be there, some of them will start to go away because
never get
more emergent needs. So there's going to be a lot of trust that we're going to have to build up between jurisdictions, and at some point we're going to have to take a leap of faith and hope that the bungee cord pulls us back up. So with that, so everyone has had a chance to speak once at least. So let me open it up and brainstorm a little bit about how we make this meaningful for everybody, and ultimately get us to a point where we've got a project, funding, and a groundbreaking event scheduled. Deb, I see your hand. You're muted.
Sorry, I couldn't find my hand raiser thing. I get confused between Zoom and WebEx. I realized I was just letting people know about my personal concern. What I am hearing from residents and neighbors and everybody is a lot of whining, a lot of people not willing to face the reality of the situation, a lot of people who want it to go away. And I wish it were otherwise, but I know that there's a lot of work to be done to bring people together so that they all have the same goal and same focus. That gets into the fourth question in considering the need to achieve a new mode split. How can we make this new travel reality understood? And that's going to be a huge lift for my neighbors, my constituents, my community. I'm there for it. But at a beginning, I've got to take that sentence and make it not Greek to people. I've got to get them to bond that we're all in this together and that they understand what it means to have a new mode shift, or sorry, new mode split. So I just wanted to jump in there, say through the venues that I participate in, I'm willing to get that survey out wide, near, far. But I've been telling people that they've got to think more than just about themselves. They've got to think about the entire community from the freeway to the water. There's a lot of people there. We're all impacted. But I know that my neighbors and my constituents are going to need simpler language. So I'm done with that. Thanks.
I think that that's a good point. I think the communication on this issue is extremely important, that people understand this is a high priority. It is getting the attention, though a lot of the work is sort of, under the surface because of the technical nature of it. It's interesting, at least my perception, and I don't represent the Admiral neighborhood. I don't pretend to. I live in it, and I have for almost 40 years now. But I've actually been impressed with the patience that people have been showing in terms of, we need to perhaps just go straight to replacement, take the pain now so that we have a permanent, what we think of as a permanent solution in a bridge or a tunnel. And I think we need not to abuse that. We need to give people hope that that we're moving as quickly as is possible, while doing the due diligence necessary for a public expenditure of this magnitude. So I'd be curious if others have perceptions within your groups. I know everybody is anxious to get moving, but I have been actually impressed with people's understanding of the scope of the problem, and that it is going to be painful, but they're okay with that as long as they see movement. Just raise your hand. I mean, don't worry about the little hand thing. John?
Thank you so much. One of the things that comes to mind in terms of funding such a large project, when A, we have a dearth of resources, and B, there is a incredible need for economic on the back end of the COVID crisis, we need to look at funding structures that are more progressive than what we have, and also funding structures that maybe we haven't tried before. I know congestion pricing is something that's been talked about in the past. It is controversial. It isn't something we've talked through all the way, but I also happen to know that it would generate an incredible amount of revenue and provide the incentives for people to seek other modes of transportation besides single occupancy vehicles. So I want to put that on the table as an option, as maybe something we can add to the funding studies that are going to be happening over the next year and a half.
Heather, do we have mechanisms to be able to do that at this point, or would that require?
We do, and in fact, the mayor is pursuing conversations with community about congestion pricing. Doing congestion for the center city. It's a congestion pricing can be a little bit more complicated in an area like downtown, where there are multiple ways to get in, as opposed to tolling on a bridge, which is pretty simple. So so congestion pricing is absolutely still in the mix. I just don't think that we're going to be able to get where we need to be on congestion pricing in time to meet the moment, the urgency of this moment. So congestion pricing is in the mix, broadly speaking, but I don't think we can get there quickly enough to help with the West Seattle Bridge.
But it's a tool. It's a potential tool.
Sure.
Yeah, you need to have some kind of a reader mechanism that adjusts the price based on occupancy and what have you.
Yeah.
Those in my day, those tools weren't available. That actually is why we did a commercial parking tax. We felt that was as close as we had to a tool to get at that. But I didn't know if it had changed in the last few years. And
So you asked the question about whether people seem to be on board with the idea of going straight to a replacement, and I'm hearing a lot of people say that as well. We do residential construction, and many times people will look at phased construction to save. If they don't have enough money, they'll look at phased, and if they have enough money, they do it all at once because you really want to limit the pain. And yes, the replacement will take longer, but that's really where most people end up as long as money is not an issue. So it's not surprising to me that that's the thing that I'm hearing over and over again. And I think just from a morale perspective, I think what's been really hard, not just with COVID, but with this, is that you cannot plan for anything. You don't know what's going to happen, and so you cannot plan. And I think the more that we can provide like with the last meeting where you said you can have cars at night on the low bridge, people were thrilled because they were like, yay, this is something that I can actually count on and plan for. And I think I just think it's been really taxing on everybody not being able to plan for anything. So
I think that's a great point. I will, though, confess to an ulterior motive. My daughter is due to deliver her third child in about 2 weeks, and she goes to Swedish Hospital from just south of the junction. So hopefully she'll go into labor at about 12:30 at night.
She should feel free to use the low bridge.
Yes, I understand. Laura, you were mentioning the junction merchants and what they're feeling. Tell me a little bit about, I mean, it's hard to figure the bridge versus the COVID, but tell me what you're observing with the junction businesses. How are they coping with this?
Well, that's a very interesting question because we've tried to separate the impact of COVID and that of the bridge. And so far we can't separate the two just because they, just came on top of each other. The biggest concerns that we have is how the closure of the bridge is going to affect tourism in West Seattle. I think, especially with the cruise industry closed down as it is, we would receive a lot of tourists come into the district on the weekends and also in the evenings as well. So the fact that we have less eyes in the junction and less feet walking the streets, not only in the junction, but in all three of our main business districts, is certainly discussions that we've had. Conversely, what we've decided to do is do some micro community engagement marketing. The way that we're looking at it currently is we have 80,000 people who are on the island with us. And so what we're looking at, are there ways to change the way that we market to people and really condense our micro engagement to West Seattle only and into parts of Burien. And I think that's a discussion that, we could have at the junction and start off, but certainly in case, those discussions, not only in this environment here under the task force, but also engage in the Morgan, Admiral, Alki, and Delridge neighborhoods as well.
Laura, I just want to thank you for what you have done for the junction with your West Seattle We Got This. You held the sign up under the walk all ways, and I appreciate you pushing that when you did put that out. And I would love to see that sort of outreach and PR push for getting all of West Seattle or all of D1 and portions of D2 around this whole bridge closure issue. You did a great job with that, and I just want to applaud that.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate those kind words. And I think there's some room in the task force meeting here to have those discussions and see if there's ways that we can help our small businesses, just elevate their voices across the entire peninsula. Just reminding our 80,000 cohabitants that the small businesses, basically, we have everything that they need, and making sure that people are looking towards small business before they begin ordering from Amazon.
And you can get there on your electric bike.
Yes.
Did you ride it yet, Heather?
Yes.
Awesome.
I went on all my errands just the other weekend on my electric bike.
Excellent. So any other thoughts as to the process that SDOT has laid out for us now in the last 4 meetings in terms of decision points? Are there places where you think that things are moving too slow? I mean, we want it to move faster, but are there places where you think we could move this more quickly, decision making less bulky? Deb?
I want to something that just came up yesterday, and so it's kind of fresh on my mind. And you asked what could SDOT be doing. I want to make sure the right hand is communicating with the left hand. I got information from another email about Highland Park. No, not Highland Park. West Marginal, thank you. West Marginal Way, and some decisions that someone was assuming were happening, blah, blah, blah. But so I had a right hand and a left hand saying 2 different things. And I really want one consistent place to have that information out, and instead of scaring the crap out of people. And I feel bad. Poor Bill Laborde, I'm always calling. Or Diane, and saying what's going on. I even have a draft email to Mayor Nichols here going, did you know about this? But I really want the information about something critical, like taking away a lane, a driving lane on West Marginal and turning it into a truck route. I agree, those are really great out of the box ideas, but I want things to make sure that it's not a right hand, left hand position. Thanks.
Okay. Anyone else? Come on, this is our chance. At least today's chance. Anne?
Sorry, one more thing that's Vashon oriented that I'm not sure has gotten out there. Obviously, this is an SDOT driven task force, not a county or, and Vashon's unincorporated King County. I've seen a lot of conversation from people asking potentially for additional water taxi service from Vashon to downtown. Right now, it's just 2 boats at commute times. So that's a good way to get more people off the island once people start going back to their jobs downtown. And I want that to stay on the radar of the county as they're considering the additional water taxi service from West Seattle also. But for right now, it seems like it's been pretty reduced in terms of the number of people leaving the island. So yeah. Just don't forget Vashon. And we have ambulances coming over, we have 8 cars coming over regularly through West Seattle also. And that, that's a challenge because the medical services here are reliant on that corridor for healthcare. So just.
Hey, Anne, can you tell if people from Southworth and Kitsap are avoiding the ferry these days, or are they kind of maintaining their?
So I asked, I've been in communication with the Southworth Ferry Riders group on Facebook, and he put together a poll just to sort of see what people are doing on their Facebook page. A number of them said that they were either continuing to work from home or only going in a couple days a week. So there definitely has been a big reduction in commute traffic from Southworth. But that, you know, as people go back to work, all of these things may change. And so we've bought ourselves a lot of time, I think, with COVID, because it's allowing some planning ahead, sort of a respite to be able to go, okay, where are we going to be in another year? And slowly ramp up those additional commute services that are going to be required.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Has there been any talk of some of the ferries are being diverted downtown as opposed to Fauntleroy?
So I sat in on the Washington State Ferries virtual update last week, I think it was. I think that they have talked about it. I think that they don't have the capacity I think that it's the dock space that's the issue, but also they're down 150 people and are on really limited service, and the boats that should have been worked on aren't being worked. So ferries is hamstrung just as much as every other transportation agency in the state right now, I think, from what I've been able to gather.
Go ahead, you're muted.
Oh.
No, there you go, Eileen.
So I'll just add on that I talked to the ferries early on, and because they're under construction down at the Coleman dock. And so there's just not really any way that they can at least do it at this point. But while I'm on, one of my questions is I guess for Heather, I just can't see how it's realistic to even think that you're going to have 500 people to walk, because it's like from where to where. And I'm a walker. So unless we came up with doing it some way to, like, you park under the bridge and there's somebody picking you up on the other side. That was the one thing I just needed to comment, that I thought that was like really pie in the sky to think that.
There are many things about our proposed mode split that are pie in the sky. And I think that what's important, yes, I completely hear you. And I think what's important, though, is we're trying to offer people a vision of how it could be. And so, and we want to include walking in that. And I suppose it depends. I mean, I suppose it depends where you live and where you're going to. I also think that we won't achieve precisely that mode split. But like all visions, and it's a little bit of an unseemly word, so it's not quite so lofty as a vision. But it's an example of where we could go. And I think of all the slices of pie, slices of donut in that chart, the most important one is the SOV slice, because all the other stuff, like, do what you like. But if you have any other kind of option other than driving your car by yourself, you have simply got to take advantage of that. If you have the option, I'm not here to tell people what their life is like, but I think what we're trying to illustrate is that we do not have the capacity on the roads that we had when we had a bridge. And so just straight up, again with the chipper, we just simply can't fit the same number of cars that we used to. And so I guess in some ways we're trying to expand the bounds of thinkable thought, right? Could I walk? Maybe, so I think that's what that's about.
We've got about 6 minutes before we try to take that treacherous path back to our original WebEx platform. And I want to ask if there is a volunteer in the group to do a short report back. It's just a couple of minutes about what our conversation revolved around. I would rather not do it because I talk too much already, but I would like to ask for a volunteer to let the whole group know what we've chatted about this afternoon. Everyone's looking down.
Okay, so I was stupid and took notes about what everybody said. So I'm glad to go through generally and talk about what folks said, but
That's plenty. You don't want to get it, yeah. And you don't want to throw anyone under the bus, so to speak, either. You want to keep it at a high level. So we have a volunteer. Deb, thank you very much.
and remember, never take notes again.
Well,
So,
then,
Glenn, I'm really glad that this opportunity got set up for all of us on a small
I'll tell you,
level to be
for
talking.
me,
I
it
appreciate
felt, yeah, it felt like we were actually getting to talk to one another, which I haven't really felt in the other meetings. Even the first one where everyone got to introduce themselves, it was just, you know, boom, next person, boom. This is much more comfortable, and if we can make the technology work slightly more smoothly, especially for the co-chairs, then I think we will try to build on this in future meetings as well. So thank you. Yeah, Ann?
I have one other suggestion. So I know we're getting these little surveys at the ends of the meetings to fill out, and they're pretty targeted questions. And it just makes me want to like ignore the question and write something in there that I actually want to talk about.
Okay.
Is it possible to just add an open-ended question onto that survey that allows us to actually say what we're thinking? Because I think that that would really be helpful as well. And that way you can collect everybody's thoughts, even if they don't feel comfortable speaking during the meeting or using the chat or whatever, you'll get everybody's feedback.
I bet we can accommodate that, yes. Right, Michael?
Yeah, so and just so I'm hearing what you're saying, just a more open-ended opportunity for feedback.
Yeah, just one more line that says, anything else you want to tell us? Would be great. Because I always feel like I'm breaking the rules when I start writing in answers you can ask about, but it's really what I want to do. So.
First lesson in politics, answer the question you want to answer.
That's right. We've noticed, Anne, and we've marked you down in the permanent record.
All right, so
troublemaker.
We've got about 3 minutes until we're supposed to be back. So I guess we close out this, and you'll
yes,
the original link.
That is correct. So we should endeavor to exit out of here and then transit back over to the initial link that we all joined from the outset of this conversation.
Great. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you back on the other side. Hopefully.
Thank you.